You are Jamie, a young villager with a love for the enchanted forest that everyone else fears. Will you find the secret power that now rules Castle Pentegarn? The paths you may take beyond the pillars are many, and the choices are yours. Only you can decide whether the wizard Pentegarn regains his kingdom. Will you fight the dragon skeleton with the brave fighter Baltic at your side? Will you try to trick the evil master whose slaves control Castle Pentegarn? Or will you run down a passage into the unknown, followed by the lovely elven thief, Lydia? No matter which choices you make, adventure and action are yours in endless quest books. You will find yourself returning again and again to experience new paths of excitement. Will your choices halt the rule of evil in the Pillars of Pentegarn? The choices are yours. Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play Gamebooks. Today's book, Endless Quest number 3, Pillars of Pentegarn, by Rose Estes, illustrated by Harry J. Quinn. A scaly, bark-covered hand wraps its long, thin fingers around your shoulder. A wispy voice whispers, "Excuse me, friend. I need to tidy up around you." Your friend, Tree, lowers a branch and you climb on eagerly. You are always happy to rest in Tree's branches and watch your friends scurry about the forest. You are Jamie, a young villager living at the edge of a mysterious forest. Although the people of your village tell tales of woodland terrors and ferocious beasts lurking in these woods, you have spent your happiest moments rambling through the forest, climbing Tree's craggy trunk, and playing with your friends Fox and Owl. While Tree's leafy fingers straighten flower stems and brush his knobby roots, you listen to him discuss a party of adventurers with Fox and Owl. "I thought them an exceptional group," Tree says. "When they built their campfire, they gathered only dead wood. They did not break any of my branches, nor did they carve my bark. When they left, they put out their fire and cleaned their campsite." "Well, I think they're heading for trouble," says Fox. "I followed them when they left this morning. They went off toward the river, but then they backtracked and started toward the Pillars of Pentegarn." Owl gasps, "Ooh, the Pillars of Pentegarn? Surely you are mistaken." "No way, bird brain," Fox snaps. "Do you think I have this nose for nothing? I can track anything, and if their little tricks aren't going to fool me, if I say they were going to the Pillars of Pentegarn, that's where they were going." There's a long silence. The Pillars of Pentegarn lie in the most frightening part of the forest. Not even the bravest creatures go there. "Hide," Tree says suddenly. "Fast! I see goblins coming up the path." You jump down and skitter under a bush. Owl flutters high into Tree's branches. Fox hides behind a rock, but then changes his mind and runs for the forest. He is in plain sight when the goblins march into the clearing. Without pausing, the goblins throw their spears at Fox. He yelps and runs into the bushes. The spears miss him, but they thud solidly into Tree, whose breeze-like groans pass unheard by the monsters. "Missed," grunts one. "Doesn't matter. Fox tastes bad," answers another. "Don't care about taste. Hunting is funnest part." The largest goblin rips its spear out of Tree, then drops to all fours and sniffs the ground. "Girl's scarf," it says, picking up a white kerchief. "They been here. Close now." The goblins crowd around their leader, pushing and shoving each other. Finally, the largest goblin pushes its way out of the crowd and runs down the trail toward the river. The others follow quickly. When the last goblin pounds down the path, you scurry out from beneath your bush and rush to Tree. He moans softly, and his branches sway in pain. You inspect the wounds and plug them with wet, clean moss. The flow of sap slowly stops. Tree has calmed, and only an occasional movement of his branches tells you he suffers great pain. Owl climbs down as soon as you finish patching Tree's trunk. A goblin spear has pierced his left wing. "Do not be overly concerned," gasped Owl. "They just winged me." You remove the spear and carefully press a pad of moss onto the wound. Fox returns and inspects his wounded friends. "Wow! Can you imagine what they'll do to those adventurers?" he asks. "I don't want to think about it," you say. "But you must," urges Tree. "If we don't warn them, they won't stand a chance. We must do something." "Don't look at me. I can't warn them," Fox says. You're the only human I'm on speaking terms with. Fox is correct, Owl says. You are the only human I have ever met who talks to animals. It would be useless for Fox or myself to attempt to warn the adventurers, for they would not understand us. You must warn them, Jamie. If you want to warn the adventurers of their danger, turn to page 100. Or you can return home, deciding you're too frightened to risk meeting the goblins again. Turn to page 9. You know what? Let's just give up. Let's just, not do anything. Fortunately, you have time to do your chores before your mother returns. Even though the south wind holds, you do not have any desire to run off to the woods. Over the next few days, you're so good your mother thinks you're sick. But you're not sick, you're just scared. You often wonder how the adventurers are doing, but since you would need to go to the Pillars of Pentegarn to find out, the question remains unanswered. Would your help have made any difference? Unfortunately, you'll never know. The end. For another adventure, go back to the beginning and try again. So, the moral of the story is, if there's an adventure to go on, you have to go on it, or there won't be an adventure. Okay, so let's warn the adventurers of their danger. I'll do it, you say. I'll show you a shortcut to the Pillars, Fox volunteers. Allow me to ride on your shoulder, Jamie, Owl says, and I too shall accompany you. You hold out your arm and Owl climbs up to your shoulder. Following Fox, you enter the forest. After 20 minutes, you come to a tall stand of ash trees. Brambles and briars grow entwined around the base of the tall, gnarled trees. You push your way through and see that the forest stops at your feet. The ground in front of you is a sickly, burnt gray. Several large pillars rise like thick white fingers from the blackened earth. Their tops are broken and jagged, and huge pieces lie strewn about the clearing. An opening gapes near the base of the pillars like a missing tooth in a jack-o'-lantern. You see 3 sets of footprints leading into the opening. As you peer into the opening, a squeal breaks from the forest, and you turn to see the goblins racing from the tangles. Choking back your fear, you duck under the pillars and enter the darkness. Glancing back, you see the goblins hard on your heels. With the goblin cries echoing in the passage, you run as fast as you can, even though you have trouble seeing. Luckily, your long legs outdistance the goblins as you race down the corridor, but your breath soon rasps in your throat. You cannot last much longer without rest. As you round the corner, a crumbling staircase rises upward into the darkness. The passage splits at the bottom and leads both left and right. You lean against the staircase and try to catch your breath, pressing your fingers against the stone wall. You feel ancient stone carvings under your hands. The cries of the goblins draw closer. Well, Featherhead, pants Fox, you got any hot ideas now? It is my astute opinion that rock! The carving moves under your fingers, and a section of the staircase opens without warning. You fall backward into darkness. Hey, Fox cries, wait for me! He slips through the opening. The wall quickly snicks shut, and darkness closes around you. The dark is thicker and more complete than any you have ever known. Goblin feet pound up the stairway you are hiding under. And then there's a long silence. Finally, Fox says, I don't know how to tell you this, but we're not alone. That is correct, a deep voice says. Who's there? You demand, trying to sound brave. In answer, a burst of light fills the room. A wrinkled old man leans on a staff in front of you. He seems more ancient and frail than anyone you have ever seen. A bright, torch-like light leaps from his staff. A young fighter stands on the old man's right, pointing his sword at you. His battle-scarred armor and bulging muscles tell you this is not someone to anger. A beautiful elven maiden stands on the left. Bright red hair hangs to her waist. She wears carefully tailored leather armor. Her hand rests on a polished dagger handle, and she watches you intently with bright green eyes. Oh boy, mutters Fox, we're in for it now. Patience, Fox, Owl says. I have found hasty judgment leads to disaster. Can't think of anything more disastrous than dying, he answers. Fox, Owl, cries the old man in a papery, dry voice, do not waste your strength arguing with each other. Neither the fighter Baltek nor the elven thief Lydia will harm you. You stare in amazement as Fox and Owl stop arguing and walk across the floor toward the old man. They understood the old man, and he understood them. Surprised, child? He asks. Don't be. Like you, I can speak with animals, and so can those with me. He pauses, and you back away from him. Do not worry, Jamie, he continues. I am not one to fear. Come, sit beside me. I shall tell you and your friends everything you need to know. He holds out his hand. His eyes are kindly and intelligent, and hold all the strength his body lacks. Without a word, you cross the small space between you and clasp the waiting hand. Fixing his gentle yet powerful gaze on you, he begins. Although it seems unlikely, this was once a beautiful place. There were no goblins, no monsters, no death, no destruction. The fields were fertile. The people were prosperous and happy, and blessed my name, the name of King Pentegarn. Although I was a wise and good king, I did not do it alone. I was aided by a great magical staff. It was given to me by my father, who had received it from his father before him, who had received it from his father before him. It contains the magic and knowledge of all those lifetimes. Unfortunately, in the hands of evil, it can be used with terrible results, as you see by this foul ruin. One night, as I slept, a black fog covered the kingdom. By the time we discovered this was a magical fog, it was too late. It had cloaked the cunning of the evil one. In the darkness of the magic fog, the evil master crept into my castle and stole my magic staff. When the sun rose, it could not pierce the black gloom. Most of my people fled in fear, and those who stayed to fight were killed by the black cloud. I fought desperately, but without my staff I was all but helpless. At last I neared total exhaustion. All about me was ruin, and I was forced to leave my own kingdom. Though I was too weak to battle my unseen foe any longer, I vowed I would return. Year after year I have returned, seeking to defeat the evil one and regain what is rightfully mine. This is my last attempt. The staff holds much of my strength, and without it I grow ever weaker. Yet if I die, there will be nothing to stop the enemy. He pauses, and then adds, It must be stopped now, and you must help me. The old man stares intensely at each of you. As his eyes lock upon yours, you feel deeply drawn to him. His mission becomes yours. You believe, as the old man does, that you must succeed. Pentegarn continues. The master, as it calls itself, usually remains in the central tower. Between us and the tower are many halls, caverns, and passageways. They will be guarded by bands of goblins and skeletons, all of whom serve the evil one. Although there are few ways to defeat the evil one, I have a plan. A cube of mystic forces and a ring of spell-turning lie hidden in the depths of the dungeon beneath the castle. I do not believe the master possesses them. If we can get them, we stand an excellent chance of success. I don't agree with you, says the elf. Wouldn't it be better to sneak straight through? We can avoid discovery as well as fighting, and perhaps pick up some treasure along the way. Well, I'm more in favor of a direct approach, says the fighter. I suggest we move slowly from one area to the next, fighting when necessary. The old man fixes his gaze upon you. And you, little one? He asks in a soft voice. What do you think? Which of the ways would you choose? Me? You stammer. I'm just a kid. I don't know anything. Age has little to do with intelligence, says the old man. Do not take yourself so lightly. You and your friends have much to offer. What is your choice? And there are 4 options here. You may choose the old man's course of action, the elf's way, the fighter's way, or your own way. I rolled a 5, so what should I do? Okay, we'll take the old man's way. All eyes rest on you. Since this is your kingdom, you say, and you have tried other methods before, we should go the way you suggest. Let's get on with it, says the fighter. How do we get out of here? Like this, says Pentegarn. He taps the floor with his staff, and the stone disappears. A dark hole appears in the floor. This chute will take us into the dungeon where the cornerstones of the castle lay. The cube lies hidden beneath one of them. The ring lies atop a pillar rising from the second cornerstone. Too much talking, grumbles Baltic. Let's get started. He draws his sword, dangles his feet over the edge of the hole, and disappears into the darkness. A man of action, says Pentegarn, as he lowers himself into the hole and is swallowed by the gloom. Last one in's a goblin, cries Lydia. Holding her nose, she leaps in after Pentegarn. Let's go, kid, urges Fox. Don't be a stick in the mud. You ease over to the hole and peer in, but you see nothing. You dangle your feet into the blackness. Fox climbs onto your lap, and Owl sits on your shoulder. You take a deep breath, close your eyes, cross your fingers, and push off. It's like flying. You're moving so fast it feels like you're on a giant glass slide. This is fun, says Fox. Let's do it again. You land with a thump, dropping Fox and Owl onto the floor. You look up dazedly to find yourself kneeling between friend and foe. Lydia stands behind you with her dagger raised. Pentegarn holds his staff with both hands, and Baltek has drawn his sword. 4 goblins and 2 wolves stand opposite of your friends. A black cloud of bats swirls above them. Scrambling backward, you join your party and watch the enemy approach. Baltek throws you a short sword, crying, "Use this, Jamie!" Then the mighty warrior races forward, hacking and slashing at the goblins. One falls immediately, but you don't have time to watch. A wolf leaps straight at you. You step aside quickly, jabbing your sword at its furry hide as it passes. It turns and snarls, its red eyes flashing with rage. The creature creeps toward you. Deep growls rumble from its throat, and foam drips from its long, white fangs. It springs at you again. The great beast lands full upon you, and you fall backward. Its shaggy black fur covers your face, and its weight pins you to the ground. A warm, salty fluid oozes over your face. It's blood. You wonder if you have been wounded, but the only pain you feel is the crushing weight of the wolf upon your chest. You slowly realize the beast no longer struggles. The wolf is dead. You wriggle from beneath the heavy body with great difficulty. Only then do you realize the creature landed on your sword as it leaped at you. The battle continues all around you. Baltek has slain 3 goblins, and Lydia is locked in fierce combat with the second wolf. The bats are darting and wheeling around Pentegarn. You can see only his staff swinging through the air. Baltek kills the last goblin and rushes to aid the elf. With 2 powerful blows, he kills the snarling wolf. Pale and shaken, Lydia sinks to the floor and says, "Thanks. I owe you one, fighter." "Any time," Baltek says, then smiles shyly and adds, "For you." The fighter strides toward Pentegarn, who is still overwhelmed by bats. Baltek disappears into the tangle of flying creatures. You see his sword flash once, and then a clap of thunder and a puff of white smoke fills the room. When the smoke clears, Pentegarn stands unharmed, but Baltek lies motionless on the ground, surrounded by bats. "Oh no!" cries Lydia, rushing to the fighter's side. "You've killed him, wizard!" "Don't worry, Lydia," the old man says. "We can fix him up in no time. If you'll help me drag him out of the way, we don't want to wake up any of these bats." The 3 of you grasp his shoulders and pull the mighty fighter away from the bats. Pentegarn positions himself at the fighter's feet, then, pinching his eyes shut, he mutters some strange words and points his staff at Baltek. That should do it. But Baltek only begins to snore, making great deep rumbling sounds. "You stupid old man!" Lydia screeches. "How could you have been a great magician? You don't even know how to undo your own spell!" "Oh dear, don't get upset," Pentegarn says. "It'll come to me in a moment." He points his staff at Baltek and commands him to rise. Everyone stares hopefully at Baltek. There's silence. Then another rumbling snore. Pentegarn frowns at his failure, then raises his staff over his head in a final magical gesture. You cover your eyes, too scared to watch, and suddenly, I feel good, says Baltek. "What's going on?" "I knew you could do it, Pentegarn," purrs Lydia. "I got so sleepy all of a sudden," Baltek continues. "What happened? Did I miss anything?" "Never mind," Pentegarn snaps. "We should be on our way. Do we first go after the Ring of Spell Turning or the Cube of Mystic Forces?" "Which one's closest?" asks the elf. "The ring," says the wizard, "but it's also the least powerful of the 2. "I think we should go for the ring," says Lydia. "Once we have it in our possession, it should help protect us against anything else we might meet." "I myself would choose the cube, were the decision mine," says Owl. "That's because you're such a square beak brain," says Fox. "If you decide to seek the Ring of Spell Turning, go to page 137. If you decide to seek the Cube of Mystic Forces, turn to page 50. "Gosh, I don't know. You say it's your kingdom and your magic stuff. If you think we should go for the cube first, how can I argue with that?" "That's it, kid," Fox yaps. "Stick with the power." "This seems a most wise decision," Owl adds. "Let us begin," says Pentegarn. He walks down a tunnel on the right. "This was a wise choice, Jamie," says Pentegarn. "I must admit I was worried you would make the wrong decision." "What does my decision count, you ask?" "I'm just a kid who happened to come along." "Nothing just happens, Jamie. Nothing is ever really an accident. There's a grand destiny to our world, and your arrival was no chance happening." You stare in wonder at the old man beside you. What do you mean? You ask in a trembling voice. Did you know I was coming? Not really, answers Pentegarn, or rather, I did not know you were coming at this precise moment, but I did know it would happen. It was destined to happen. You walk through a long, narrow tunnel lit by streaks of color. Pretty, isn't it? Asks Pentegarn. You mix 6 liters of oil of rainbows with 1 liter of ointment of fireflies. Soon you walk into a cavern so high you can barely see the ceiling. Baltec, Pentegarn says, I think we may need your services. The cornerstone lies in this cavern. The walls of the huge cavern twinkle and glitter with brilliant streaks of color. In the center of the room, an enormous shiny block of stone sits. An equally large shiny pillar rests atop the block. It rises high into the cavern. This is the cornerstone of the kingdom, says Pentegarn. The cube of mystic forces lies beneath it. We must not fail in our attempts to retrieve the cube, for once the pillar is moved, the evil one will know we are here. The fighter flexes his biceps and moves towards the cornerstone. He bends down and grasps the immense block, but before he can attempt to move the pillar, you hear a strange noise, as if someone were shaking a bunch of sticks together in a bag. Kid, I don't like the sound of this, says Fox. How about checking out now? Hush, Fox, you say. You strain to see what's making that strange noise. The biggest skeleton you have ever seen stalks out of the gloom at the far edge of the vast cavern. It's a dragon skeleton. It must measure 40 feet from the end of its toothy mouth to its last tiny tailbone. It clacks toward you slowly. Clutching your small sword, you leap in front of Pentegarn. Your knees are shaking, but the old man must be protected from the giant monster. The fearful skeleton stops and stares at you. It has no eyes, but you feel the force of its sightless gaze as the head lowers. Its sharp teeth glint in the rainbow light. Your knees shake harder. Should you fight such a ferocious monster? It's awfully large, and the chance that you can defeat it is very small indeed. If you fight, you'll probably be devoured by the skeleton, but you are the only thing that stands between the monster and Pentegarn. If you flee, it will certainly devour Pentegarn. If you decide that the monster is too terrible and that you stand no chance of defeating it, turn to page 46. If you decide that you must stand and defend Pentegarn at any cost, even if it means battling such a terrifying monster, turn to page 128. It's just too scary for me. You back away from the dragon skeleton, hoping Pentegarn can escape on his own. But unfortunately, the skeleton opens its toothy mouth and lowers its huge head. Pentegarn tries to protect himself, but he falls to the ground as he backs away. The monster grabs Pentegarn in its mouth. Realizing that Pentegarn is finished if you do nothing, you charge the monster, swinging your sword wildly. The skeleton lowers one great claw and grasps you. Your arms are completely trapped and you cannot even move your toes. Carrying you in its claw, and Pentegarn in its mouth, the great dragon turns and moves back into the dark cavern. Looking back at your only hope, Lydia and Baltec, you see the creature's huge tail swish and send them flying across the room. It looks like this is the end. Alright, guess we're going to have to fight this dragon. Even though it may well cost you your life, you must defend Pentegarn. With the mightiest battle cry you can muster, hoo-ah! You charge the giant skeleton. The bony dragon head lowers slowly as you run toward the creature's front legs. It opens its great mouth. Ignoring the impending doom, you swing your little sword at the dragon's shin. Amazingly, the sword bites into the bare bone and a tiny chip falls from the skeleton. Fearing the bony mouth will seize you at any second, you raise your sword to strike one last time before the end comes. Instead, though, a strong hand grasps your shoulder. Effortlessly, it pushes you back out of the way. Stay out of this, kid. Leave the fighting to me, says Baltec, swinging his mighty sword at the dragon's descending head. The head dodges Baltec's flashing sword, and Baltec uses the opportunity to swing at the skeleton's front leg. You see, kid? This is how you do it! He completes his slash, and the skeleton's foot goes flying. He now rushes back and forth, slashing and swinging at the monster. The skeleton tries to follow Baltec, but it's too slow, and Baltec is fast. Another blow slices off part of the skeleton's tail. Zap! Baltec strikes the right shoulder and pieces fly. The dragon tries to turn, but it stumbles as it wobbles after the mighty warrior. The great neck extends forward for just a moment, and crunch! Baltek's sword bashes down on the neck. The blow slices through the neck, and soon the awful creature lies shattered and still. You edge around the skeleton and reach Baltek's side. "You see, kid," breathes Baltek, "you've got to learn to pick your fights. Never get into a fight you can't win, unless the stakes are so great you're willing to die." "They were," you say, glancing shyly at Pentegarn. Pentegarn drapes a thin arm around your shoulder. "I thank you, my young friend." Baltek eyes you thoughtfully. "Anyway," he says, "you held it off long enough for me to get there. You'll be a mighty warrior in a few years." "Baltek," Pentegarn says, "we thank you for disposing of the guardian of the cube, and I thank you, Jamie, for saving me from what would have been a most uncomfortable end. When you are rested and ready, Baltek," Pentegarn continues, "we shall try for the cube." "I was born ready," answers Baltek. "There's no need to wait. That was merely a warm-up exercise." "All right, but I warn you," says Pentegarn, "this is no easy task. Even if we are lucky enough to get the cube, there will be no time to rest. We will have to flee as though our lives depended on it, as indeed they will." Baltek removes his sweat-slicked armor and flexes his arm and leg muscles. His body is covered with a film of sweat, and never have you seen such enormous muscles. With a fierce look on his face, the muscular fighter approaches the shiny cornerstone. He studies it for a long moment, then bends down and digs his fingers under its base. He closes his eye and lifts. Sweat breaks out upon his forehead and pours down his face. Every muscle in his body is stretched to its limits and beyond. The stone does not move at first. Then you hear a deep groan. The fighter's face grows deep red. A terrible grimace of pain and exhaustion creases his brow. He is near the end of his powers, but still he strains against the great weight. You hear a screech like the earth ripping apart, and the enormous cornerstone moves. Lydia tries to sneak her hand under the stone to pull the cube away. "Higher, Baltek!" she cries. Even straining with all his might, the fighter cannot raise the stone any higher. Again, she tries to snake her hand under the pillar. "Just a little higher," she cries. "I can feel it beneath my fingers." But Baltek only groans, and the pillar slips a fraction of an inch down. Lydia jerks her hand from underneath the pillar. "If only my hand were smaller!" Baltek groans again, and nearly drops the stone as he loses his grip. Luckily, however, his fingers catch on the side of the stone, and he stops it before it drops to the ground. "Hurry!" he goes. "I can't hold!" The pillar slips yet again, and Pentegarn says, "We must succeed, Baltek. Without the cube, we cannot defeat the evil one. You must move the pillar." Baltek closes his eyes, then groans mightily. The pillar rises a fraction of an inch, and Baltek appears to tire. But instead of dropping the pillar, Baltek holds it for a moment, straining against the great weight. His face grows red, and the veins in his neck stick out. The strain disappears from his face for a moment. Baltek suddenly yells, lifts, and heaves with his last ounce of strength. The pillar moves 3 feet to the right, and Baltek lets it crash to the ground. You see a great depression in the earth where the pillar stood, and in it the cube lies nearly buried. It's plain and ordinary. You see nothing to indicate that it has any magical powers. In spite of his insistence on speed, Pentegarn moves towards the cornerstone as though in a daze. You shake his elbow gently. Pentegarn? You say, "Are you still with us?" "What?" He blinks, noticing you at last. "Oh, yes, my child, it's nothing. Nothing at all." The light returns to his eyes. "Despite my efforts over all these long years, I never believed I would hold the cube of mystic forces in my hands again." "Why did you keep trying if you didn't think it could be done?" you ask. "Because when you want something more than life itself, your want overshadows everything else. Though I did not believe I could retrieve the cube, I had to try." He falls silent for a long moment. "Come on, Pentegarn," you finally say. "We can't waste any time. The stone's been moved." "Oh, yes, child, you're right, of course," Pentegarn agrees. He stoops and takes the cube into his hand. Pentegarn holds the cube in the flat of his hand, presses it in 2 places, and a dazzling light, nearly as bright as the sun, bursts forth. Raising your hands to your eyes, you peer through your fingers. Pentegarn stands at the heart of the brilliant light, seemingly unaffected. The cube sends forth its throbbing ray even more brightly. You cover your face completely and turn to the wall, unable to bear its intensity. At long last, the light dims. You carefully lower your arms and turn around. Your hands drop to your sides and your mouth falls open. Pentegarn is gone. A healthy, middle-aged man, almost as tall as Baltek, stands in his place. He holds the cube on the flat of his palm, as Pentegarn did moments earlier. Now the cube merely sparkles and twinkles like a giant diamond. "Who are you? Where's Pentegarn?" you cry angrily, raising your sword. The tall figure bursts into laughter. "Jamie, put your sword down. It is I, Pentegarn." "How can it be?" you cry. "The cube, little one," he answers. "The cube. Its force has returned some of the power and strength stripped from me by the loss of my staff." "Whatever the cause, I'm glad," says Baltic. There's bounce to the warrior's step, and he seems untouched by his great effort. "It usually takes me a while to recover from pulls like that, but I feel fine. As long as we're all here and ready, I suggest we leave before the monsters get here." "Yes, indeed," Pentegarn says. "Come, my friends, now we must retrieve the ring." You can scarcely take your eyes off the kingly figure striding so strongly before you. It is evident that the others feel the same, for expressions are cheerful and full of hope. Even Fox has nothing bad to say. You're trying hard to keep up with Pentegarn when he halts abruptly. "Our first encounter," Pentegarn says. "This should be fun." "Speak for yourself, King," says Lydia quickly. "I don't like the odds. I say we find another way to get to the ring." You peer around Pentegarn's robes and see a great mob of goblins pouring down the corridor toward you. "Let me at 'em," growls Baltic. "We may not win, but there won't be many of them standing when I'm through." The decision is yours. Should you try to outrun the angry mob of goblins and find a safe place to hide? Or should you try to defeat the horde of goblins? If you choose to run, turn to page 56. If you want to rely on your luck and Baltic's strength and skill, turn to page 146. All right. Let's stay and fight them. Hoping you've made the correct decision, you draw your sword and take your place beside Baltic. Pentegarn steps in front of you and moves his hand over the cube. The goblins continue to advance steadily. You almost step in front of Pentegarn to protect him from the goblins, but Baltic holds your shoulder. "He's got something up his sleeve, Jamie," the fighter says. Pentegarn raises the cube, mumbling magic words. The goblins, almost within striking range, continue to advance. Then they scream, "Get them! Master want them!" The cube flashes, then glows brightly. Still clutching your sword, you raise an arm to cover your face. You close your eyes against the glare. "Help!" The goblins scream, "Run away! Run away!" Ah! Peeking from under your arm, you see the goblins running down the corridor in the nearly blinding light. Knowing how hard it is for you to see, you can imagine how painful the light must have been for the foul goblins, who love only dark places. You hurry along the corridor into another cavern. Like the one that held the cube, a large pillar rises high into the air from a huge cornerstone. "Wait for me, friends," Pentegarn says. "I'll be right back." He closes his eyes, gripping his staff with one hand and the cube with the other. Then he utters a mysterious word and zooms into the air. When he reaches the top of the pillar, he lands and quickly picks the ring off of it. He flies back toward you. As Pentegarn lands, he says, "There, that didn't take long. I've forgotten how much fun flying can be. I shall have to do it more often." Pentegarn holds the ring out for you to see. It's incredible. It looks like a circlet of holly leaves fashioned from heavy gold. Small diamonds, rubies, and emeralds are sprinkled upon the leaves. A silver two-headed serpent lies coiled about a large gem in the center. The amazing stone flashes silver, green, blue, and red in the light. Pentegarn places the ring on his right hand. The serpent slithers through the holly leaves and clings to Pentegarn's finger. Small eyes open and tiny mouths breathe flames. The great stone gleams with a life all its own. "This is a very powerful and primitive thing," Pentegarn says. "It is made from the very essence of good and evil. You must be very strong indeed to bear it." You stare in fascination. When you look up at last, Pentegarn stands straight and tall, a man in the prime of his life. He's as big as Baltic, and his hair is now a rich, shiny brown. "My lord," you say, bowing. "This is no time for ceremony, Jamie. There is still much to be done. We must face the evil one himself. We now begin the most hazardous portion of our trial, and the risk is severe indeed." Without further comment, Pentegarn turns and leads the way down a dark, foul-smelling corridor. Turn to page 58. You follow Pentegarn through the confusing tunnels. After 20 minutes of endless wandering, Pentegarn stops. You are in a dark corridor, ending in a bare dirt wall. There's a wooden trapdoor a few feet above your head. Where are we? You whisper. At the foot of the tower, Pentegarn replies. It is time to face our destiny. No sooner has he uttered the words than the trapdoor flies open. All is dark beyond. Pentegarn grasps the edge of the doorway and pulls himself into the darkness with one swift movement. You cannot let Pentegarn go alone, but even though you leap, you cannot reach the opening. Here, Jamie. Your heart is larger than you are, says Baltic. Placing two large hands about your waist, he lifts you into the gloom above. Then he boosts Lydia and Fox up, following right behind them. You are surrounded by silence, and you cannot see anything. Maybe no one's here, you say, hopefully. No, hisses a deep, whispering voice. A brilliant, silvery light floods the room. The light springs from a staff of great age. Who's there? Cries Pentegarn. Who dares hold the staff of kings, the staff of Pentegarn? A low laugh fills the room. Don't you know me, Pentegarn? We've met often enough. The light dims until it only glows softly. You now see dozens of skeletons and goblins, all armed and grinning, crowded against the far wall. The staff stands in the center of the room, glowing softly. A thick black cloud billows about its base. As you watch, the cloud pulses and throbs as though alive. Then it mushrooms to enormous size, filling the room. Before your astonished eyes, the cloud turns into a large number of shrilling, chittering bats. They soar and wheel about your heads, the hot stink of their bodies filling your breath. You strike wildly at the furry creatures, but they deftly avoid your blows. Lydia screeches in fear, swinging her fists madly at the bats encircling her head. Finally, after what seems like an eternity of terror, the bats disappear, and the swirling black fog replaces them. Gasping for breath, Lydia falls into Baltic's arms and clutches him tightly. The black fog slithers and twists, growing larger and smaller. It snakes close enough to touch, then draws away. It spins like a small cyclone beside the staff, and then it disappears. In its place stands a huge black wolf with fire-red eyes and long white fangs. The wolf whines and snarls, its belly close to the ground, its back legs bunched beneath, and it springs at you. You throw your arms up to protect yourself from its attack, but the wolf disappears in mid-leap and the black fog returns. Once more it twists and twirls, changing its size and shape with every breath. It moves back to its original spot beside the staff. Slowly, the form of a bent black figure clad in a black draping cloak emerges. The cloak covers it from head to toe. Its face is completely hidden. All you can see is a bit of swirling black fog, more terrifying than any face could be. It keeps its hands tucked inside the folds of its sleeves. As you can see, the hollow voice hisses from the depths of the hood, I have many faces. I am darkness. I am fear. I am your worst nightmares. It pauses, the fog inside its hood rolling slowly. Then it continues in a thundering voice. I command you to bow to my power. Your quest is hopeless. No, shouts Pentegarn. Not so long as I live. He raises his young staff, a mere twig compared to the staff of kings, and points it at the big black figure. A bright shaft of lightning blasts out of the end of the staff toward the enemy, but the figure raises its hand and points its staff at Pentegarn. Pentegarn's bolt stops in midair, trembles, and then retraces its passage. As the bolt strikes, it travels the length of the staff and explodes. Pentegarn's staff bursts apart and falls to the ground, shattered into a million smoking pieces. Do not try your petty tricks on me, the voice sneers. How dare you challenge me when I have this? It raises the mighty staff. I dare because I am the rightful king, Pentegarn shouts back, and because I have this and this! So saying, Pentegarn opens his hand to reveal the pulsating cube of mystic forces. At the same time, he raises his other hand and shows the ring. The tiny serpents twist and glide around his finger, hissing fiercely. The evil one hesitates, its smoky hands writhing around the staff slowly and thoughtfully. Finally it speaks. It has amused me to watch you live your life in hopelessness, but now you dare challenge me. None may live who do not bow to my power. It points the staff at Pentegarn. You no longer amuse me. Die! I do not choose to die, Pentegarn answers calmly. He steps forward and grasps the Staff of Kings. Back! Back! Cries the dark figure. Do not try! The staff glows dazzling silver, then dims to eerie red. It flashes silver once again and begins to throb. The foes, one slight and frail, the other large and black, sway to and fro in the flashing light. Suddenly, a tremendous boom echoes off the walls, and thick gray smoke fills the room. You begin coughing so hard you can barely stand. Even the goblins choke and wheeze. When the smoke clears, you rub your burning eyes and strain to see the victor. You see the shattered remains of the skeletons, the bewildered goblins trying to find their master, and finally you see Pentegarn standing before you. The only sign the evil one ever existed is a scorch mark on the floor. Pentegarn turns his ring and staff toward the goblins and says, I, Pentegarn, son of kings and rightful heir to this kingdom, command you to leave. I give you until morn to clear yourself and all your kind from my kingdom. Take nothing with you and harm no one as you leave. Upon pain of unending death, I command this. The goblins trip and fall over each other in their haste to escape, literally dropping through the trapdoor. Pentegarn turns his attention to you and your companions. But this is a new Pentegarn, so unlike the kind old man you grew to love. You find it difficult to meet his bold gaze. You quickly kneel, and your companions do the same. Come, Jamie, do not be afraid. I am still myself, and so are you. We are still friends. Thanks to your loyalty and bravery, we have won. Now is a time for great rejoicing, great efforts, and new beginnings. Soon we will have a feast of celebration, and at that feast we will celebrate more than the rebirth of a kingdom. We will celebrate the discovery of the heir to the staff and my kingdom. You look about and wonder. I suppose you mean me, says Fox. Pentegarn's deep laughter fills the small room. No, Fox, modest and brilliant though you are, I am not speaking of you. I am speaking of one who is honest and true, loyal and brave. Sure sounds like me, mutters Fox. Whose veins carry the blood of kings and queens. There is silence as everyone looks about in wonder. I am speaking of you, Jamie. You are my great-grandchild, the heir to the kingdom. Me? I'm your great-grandchild? You ask. I'm your apprentice and your heir? Are you sure? Yes, child. I am very sure. If you will continue to place your trust in me, I will take you as my apprentice and teach you all I know. One day the staff, the ring, and the cube will all be yours, as will the kingdom. So you must learn to be wise and strong now. If you've got so much to share, says Lydia, her hands on her hips, how about us? Yeah, barks Fox, I want my share. Can we afford a fox muzzle? Says Owl. Pentegarn laughs a great booming laugh and says, Lydia, Baltic, Fox, Owl, Jamie, you will all share, and treasure is the least I have to offer. Come, my friends, gather round. We have much to discuss. The end. And that's as good a place to stop as any because that is the best ending in this whole book. We were lucky today. So thanks for joining me with Pillars of Pentegarn. This is one of the few Endless Quest books that actually had a sequel, Revenge of the Rainbow Dragons. So, come in next time, and perhaps we'll see how that one goes.